I was against this war, Citizen Connor. When every speech in the Assembly was a drum and bugle speech, I said war was a mistake.
That is ancient history.
We will soon water our horses by the Thames. We shall turn London into a new Carthage. Spring shall be brought to Europe. Jacobin clubs will open in Berlin, in Vienna, in Warsaw. All were said in front of me to justify the war policy. Yes, armies of slaves facing our army of free men would instantly lay down their weapons and plead with French bombardiers to remove their chains. We would have universal peace and liberty at the point of a French bayonet. But we forgot to ensure our own liberty first. We entrusted a king to fight a war of liberty, and then we wondered at the betrayals. And now we must fight to defend ourselves. And in Citizen Carnot resides great organizational wisdom, I'm sure. Copper, saltpeter, fodder for horses. Good, good. These things should be organized on a national basis. I have spoken for such in the Jacobins. But this war will be won here, not at the front. Our liberty will be won here. And for that we must produce honest government and build virtuous institutions. The founding of a republic is not child's play, nor is it the work of brutes, which is the same thing. Wisdom as well as power presided at the creation of the universe. Finished? Not quite, Citizen Carnot. We complete this business. We do not parley with our enemies. As my friend Saint-Just said in the convention, we take from and send our enemies nothing but lead. And always let us remember, our enemies are also in France. They may not announce themselves for our convenience. Many wear the red bonnet and cockade, but their mission is identical to that of the slave powers which surround us, to destroy the virtue of the French people. Now, Rousseau said the people want what is good, but they don't always see it. It is our job to see it for them and to act accordingly.
ISIS citizens?
ISIS. Why not?
You have to ask yourself whether he was in the right place. Was he a practical politician? He thought that the language of virtue was the only possible revolutionary discourse. He did not think that the language of pragmatism was the appropriate one in which to discuss the revolution. You can say he was out of place there, that what he really was a prophet.
More terrifyingly, according to his enemies, Robespierre was a prophet armed with scripture. A scripture he was determined to enact in France regardless of the human cost. The scripture was the social contract by Enlightenment philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a work that was said to have hardly left Robespierre's side. In it, Rousseau had argued that an increase in liberty would result in an increase in virtue, because it would bring man closer to his original, exalted nature.
Most of the revolutionaries are men of the Enlightenment. They believe that human character is like a blank slate. People's character, people's identity is formed by the sense impressions which bombard them from the earliest period. In some ways, what's happening in the revolution is the extension of that principle from the individual to the society. So the sense is that one can start again, one can bring people into a new regime and make new men of them.
Another admirer.
I do nothing to encourage it.
I think vertu translates badly into this rather prim English word, virtue. I think virtue meant strength, it meant honesty, it meant purity of intent. You see, Saint-Just was already saying that it is a crime to fail to hate the enemies of the revolution. So a very high standard of engagement was being required here.
It's not a high standard. It's only a high standard if you want the world to dissolve into tyranny. Saint-Just he's a deeply intolerant person, as indeed is Maximilien Robespierre. The notion of power as schoolmasterliness, equipped not just with the right to cane you, but cut your head off. He does believe in an elite class, the Guardians, who are the kind of mystical receiving antennae of sort of tremble in the ether coming down, you know, from the universal harmonies to tell us exactly how we should be living our lives.
You should be clearer when you talk of happiness, Maxime. Some people still confuse it with pleasure.
Happiness, virtue. To Robespierre, these were more than just vague aspirations. They were to be the permanent condition of the French citizens in the new republic.
The idea that happiness was a new idea in Europe is something that many of the revolutionaries expressed. It was a philosophical idea that they took from the Enlightenment and they attempted to put into practice. And they thought that they could legislate so that people would be happy in this world and that the poor were really the people who should be the powers of the earth.
But the poor in 1793 were not the happy, wise peasants of Rousseau's fond imagination. They were the sans-culottes of Paris, the miserable urban poor. And to them happiness meant not virtue, but food. On September the 5th, the Committee of Public Safety discovered the power of the sans-culottes for themselves.
It has begun.
Quick, to Notre Dame. Seek forgiveness. The world is coming to an end.
It was a day of a full solar eclipse, when to the delight of enlightened men who could predict such cosmic events, the noonday skies over Paris darkened.
It's one of those things that in earlier times would have sent everyone scurrying away superstitiously. But as far as we can tell, it occasions very little more than sort of amusement.
During the eclipse, armed sans-culottes invaded the National Assembly and demanded action against their enemies, the farmers, who they accused of deliberately starving Paris. Their cry was to make terror the order of the day. And to appease them, their spokesman Collot d'Herbois was elected to the committee.
Ta-da!
Very good, Collot. What's your next trick?
Collot d'Herbois is an actor and a playwright, a theatrical impresario, I suppose you would say. He's someone who comes from the world of the theatre. As far as that radical leadership is concerned, they know best. They are the real representatives of the sans-culottes, who are the real patriots.
He's brought into the Committee of Public Safety in September 1793, largely as a result of the sans-culotte calls for the Jacobins to step up the terror. So he's brought in as a man who will do this, who is prepared to do this.
I'm astonished by your predicament. You lack flour? Take it from the peasants.
Everyone now understands the penalties for hoarding. We have the power of deterrence.
Let me tell you about a peasant. You cannot threaten him with words. He lacks the imagination.
Even the peasant has heard of the guillotine.
He won't believe in anything he cannot see.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's not heaven he believes in. It's his priest. And he sees his priest every day.
And there you have your solution. Remove the priest.
And appeal to his patriotism.
In Cahors, the civil commissioners did the right thing. The poor of the district were invited to a civic dinner where they were waited on by the rich. When the time comes to cut the corn in Cahors, all parties will cooperate.
You have no comprehension. Revolution is not a course in ethics, Couthon. To get his wheat, you must slap a farmer across the mouth and point a musket at his wife. Food must be hunted out of the barns with bayonets. That, my friend, is the most efficient method of agriculture we have. The people I represent demand you take firmer measures than you have so far given them. This morning, on my way to the convention, I heard the slum children of Saint Antoine singing a royalist song. Why? Who taught them? My people want the royalists caught and branded on the forehead. They want the aristocrats chained in groups of 6 and sent to the front lines to fight for the Republic.
That perhaps is not productive.
But you should know the spirit is there, as it is against the aristocrats in this town, who hoard leather, grain, timber, soap.
I cannot follow this. When he says aristocrats, does he mean merchants?
Say merchants, we will understand you.
Merchants, aristocrats, counter-revolutionaries, what does it matter? To most Parisians, they are the same.
We will ask the convention to pass a new law of suspects. Local committees of patriots will have powers of arrest. Those suspected of counter-revolution will have their papers removed and will answer to those committees. Suspicion is a superb thing. It is to liberty what jealousy is to love.
More prisoners to be processed through the interminable tribunals. Terror is the order of the day, huh? Or is it talk? Place the suspects in houses that have been mined. Touch the paper. Boom! The problem is closed.
It's incredibly difficult to understand the psychology of many of these people in the Terror. Someone like Collot, there's nothing in his character before 1789 which would lead one to believe that he would do the sort of things that he did in 1793, 94. It brings out a sort of dramatic and violent part of them, which I think probably would have lain latent until they died.
Collot's arrival on the committee resulted in the law of suspects, which created whole new categories of anti-revolutionary crime. A raised eyebrow during a patriotic speech, an outmoded form of address. To the secret policeman, such things could now indicate a dangerous sympathy for the aristocracy.
Well, this is what terror is about. It's frightening people into conformity.
Someone could be heard making a profane joke about Committee of Public Safety in a tavern or something, and he could be, lose his head a week later for being an enemy to the patrie.
Pricking your eye with a pin so that you couldn't be one of those sent off to fight for France. Producing sour wine with the intention of injuring the true patriots. Declaring in public a fig for the nation.